At 19, Emily lived in a quiet little town, surrounded by hills and wide fields. Everyone knew everyone, and life moved slowly. Emily's family was known for being hardworking but not wealthy. Her father worked on small farms, and her mother helped with sewing and selling homemade bread. Emily had grown up helping her parents, dreaming sometimes of a life far beyond the hills and dusty roads of her town. She loved reading books about cities, adventures, and people who had exciting lives. But in reality, her days were filled with chores, helping at the market, and taking care of her younger brother. Emily's life was simple, but her family's financial struggles were real. They had always managed to live modestly, but there were times when money problems made everything harder. School supplies, repairs at home, even little treats were often put off because there was simply no extra money. Emily knew her parents wanted the best for her, and she wanted to help them in any way she could. She had learned to dream quietly, knowing her family's needs often came first. One day, the news that would change her life arrived quietly but forcefully. A proposal had come from James, a man everyone in the town knew simply as the Millionaire Cowboy. James owned a huge ranch on the outskirts of town. He had many horses, large fields, and even a small herd of cattle. Rumors of his wealth were everywhere, but he was also known for being kind. He helped neighbors when their crops failed, paid for repairs at the school, and sometimes quietly donated to families who were struggling. Despite his fortune, he remained approachable and humble, which made people respect him even more. The proposal itself was unexpected. One afternoon, Emily's father received a letter. Emily read it nervously as her mother held her hand. The letter was from James himself. It was polite, respectful, and spoke of wanting to know Emily better. But it also carried an underlying sense of expectation that a marriage could be the solution to several problems. Security for Emily, a companion for James, and respect for her family. Emily felt a storm of emotions. On one hand, the idea of marrying someone so wealthy, so important in the town, felt overwhelming. On the other hand, she understood why her family might see it as a blessing. It was clear that saying yes could solve many of the financial worries that had haunted them for years. Emily had always hoped for adventure, for choices of her own, and the freedom to explore life outside the hills. Now, she had to balance those dreams with duty, with family, and with the respect everyone in town expected her to show. In the days that followed, Emily thought long and hard. She walked through the fields at sunrise, the morning mist soft on her face, wondering how her life had come to this. She spoke with her mother quietly, sharing her fears and dreams. Her mother listened with understanding and sadness. "You have always dreamed, Emily," her mother said gently, "and I want you to be happy. But sometimes, life gives us paths we did not expect. Perhaps this path will lead to something beautiful too." The town began to notice the proposal. Friends and neighbors whispered in the market, at the bakery, and along the dusty streets. Some said Emily was lucky. Others wondered if she had any say in the matter at all. The idea of a young girl marrying a much older, wealthy man seemed like a story from a book rather than real life. Emily tried to ignore the gossip, but it was impossible. People stared at her differently, and even strangers asked questions that made her heart race with anxiety. The preparations for the wedding were unlike anything Emily had ever experienced. James's ranch was vast and beautiful, with flowers carefully planted along the walkways and lanterns hung for the evening ceremony. Emily had never imagined her life could include such elegance. She watched as servants carefully arranged tables, polished silverware, and prepared flowers. For the first time, she felt like she was stepping into a different world, one that shimmered with possibility, but also carried an invisible weight. Despite all the grandeur, Emily's emotions were complicated. She wanted to be polite, to honor her family's wishes, and to show respect to James. But she also wanted to maintain her own identity, her sense of self. She worried about being judged, about being misunderstood, and about losing her voice in a life that seemed to be written for her by others. She spent hours in her room, trying on dresses, arranging her hair, and practicing polite smiles. Every mirror reminded her of the new life waiting ahead. The wedding day arrived with golden sunlight spilling over the hills. The town's small church, decorated with ribbons and wildflowers, looked magical. Emily's heart pounded as she walked through the aisle, her hands trembling slightly. She saw her family sitting quietly, pride and worry written across their faces. James waited at the front, tall and calm, his eyes kind but unreadable. He nodded to her, and she nodded back, unsure of what the future truly held. As the ceremony began, Emily noticed the townspeople gathered outside the church, their curiosity almost tangible. She felt every gaze on her, and yet she held herself upright, moving forward with courage she did not know she had. The vows were exchanged, simple and sincere. James spoke with calm honesty, promising respect, care, and partnership. Emily repeated her promises, her voice steady even as her mind raced with questions about what life would be like after this day. After the ceremony, the celebration moved to James's ranch. Horses grazed in the fields nearby, and lanterns lit the evening sky, casting a warm glow over the happy faces. The townspeople who attended whispered among themselves, curious about how the young bride felt and how she would adapt to her new life. Emily kept a composed smile. Yet, inside, she felt a mixture of nervousness, excitement, and cautious hope. Throughout the evening, James showed moments of unexpected thoughtfulness. He introduced Emily to the ranch workers, spoke kindly to her family, and seemed genuinely interested in her opinions. Emily began to sense that perhaps her life with James would not be as rigid and unyielding as she had feared. Though she was still uncertain about the future, these small gestures offered reassurance that she might be treated with respect and kindness. By the time the sun set, Emily found herself alone for a moment on the balcony overlooking the ranch. The wind brushed her face, carrying the scent of hay and wildflowers. She thought about her family, the life she had left behind, and the choices that lay ahead. Though she was still only 19, she felt a strange sense of readiness, as if she could step into this new chapter and find a balance between duty and dreams. The night ended with soft music, laughter, and gentle conversations. The townspeople slowly returned to their homes, carrying stories of the wedding that would be whispered for weeks. Emily, standing beside her husband, realized that this day had marked not just a change in status or wealth, but the beginning of a journey into an unknown world, a world where she could discover who she was, who she wanted to be, and how she might navigate life with courage, wisdom, and hope. Though Emily could not predict what lay ahead, she understood one thing clearly. Life had a way of presenting unexpected paths, and sometimes those paths, even when daunting, could lead to beauty and growth. And with that thought, she held her head high, ready to step forward into a life that was hers to shape, even in ways she had never imagined. After the wedding, Emily thought her life would settle into a routine of appearances, polite conversations, and responsibilities she did not fully understand. But James had something unexpected planned. On the morning after the ceremony, he asked her to join him in the main hall of the ranch. Emily's heart beat fast. She was curious and nervous, unsure what this could be. The hall was spacious, with tall windows letting in the sunlight, casting warm patterns across the polished wooden floor. James smiled at her. A calm, reassuring expression. "I have something for you," he said. Emily expected jewelry, a property deed, or something grand that would reflect his wealth. She was ready to be impressed, to show polite gratitude, and then to continue the life that had already begun. But what happened next surprised her in a way she could not have imagined. James led her to a small room at the back of the hall. It was simple, not decorated like the rest of the ranch. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with stories, histories, and poems. There was a large wooden desk, neatly organized with papers and writing materials, and a single window looking out over the fields. Emily blinked, unsure if she understood. "This," James said softly, "is yours." Emily looked at him in confusion. "Mine?" she asked. James nodded. "I know you love to read, to write, to explore ideas. I want you to have a space that is entirely yours, a place where you can dream, plan, and create. No one will disturb you here unless you want them to. It is a gift for you, not for appearances, not for anyone else, but for you." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She had expected material gifts, perhaps gold, perhaps a fine horse, or a beautiful dress. But James had given her something that showed he truly knew her, that he had listened to her dreams. She felt a mix of gratitude, relief, and a growing warmth toward this man she hardly knew. Over the next few days, Emily explored the room, arranging the books and papers, feeling a sense of ownership she had never known. The townspeople began to hear about this gift, and their opinions began to shift. They had assumed Emily's life would be one of luxury and obligation, but now it seemed she had a chance to grow, to learn, and to have a voice in her own life. Emily started to spend more time with James. They walked along the fields, watched the horses, and talked about everything from the weather to ideas about the future. She began to see a man who was kind, thoughtful, and patient, someone who valued her mind as much as her presence. The initial fear she had felt about marrying a wealthy stranger began to fade. Slowly, she started to imagine a future where she could be herself and still be part of this new world. The ranch itself became a place of discovery. Emily learned about the work of running the property, about the horses, the cattle, and the land that James managed. She worked alongside the ranch hands, not as a task imposed upon her, but as a way to understand the life around her. James never asked her to do anything she did not wish to do. He encouraged her curiosity and rewarded her efforts with praise and guidance. One afternoon, Emily found herself sitting under an old oak tree, reading a book she had brought from her room. James came to sit beside her, carrying a small picnic basket. He placed it on the ground and smiled. "I thought we could enjoy some fresh air," he said. They ate quietly, enjoying the simplicity of the moment. Emily realized that despite the wealth and the expectations, life could be simple, warm, and filled with small joys. As weeks passed, Emily began to notice subtle changes in how the townspeople treated her. They no longer whispered as much, nor did they look at her with suspicion. Instead, they saw a young woman who had grown confident, thoughtful, and happy in her new environment. They admired how she carried herself, how she respected the land, and how she spoke with kindness and intelligence. The gift James had given her was not just the room, but the freedom to show who she truly was. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, James took Emily on a ride through the ranch. The wind whipped past her face, the horses' hooves thudding softly against the earth. They reached a high point overlooking the valley, where the fields stretched endlessly and the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. Emily felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She realized that her life had transformed in ways she could not have imagined. "I never thought I would have a place like this," Emily said quietly, her eyes shining. James looked at her with a gentle smile. "You deserve it," he said. "I wanted you to know that wealth is not just money or land. True wealth is having freedom, respect, and the chance to follow your dreams." Emily nodded, understanding the depth of his words. She began to feel a growing bond with James, not as someone who had forced her into a marriage, but as a partner who respected and valued her. She realized that love and trust were being built slowly, quietly, in small moments of understanding and kindness. The months that followed were filled with learning and growth. Emily discovered a talent for organizing the ranch's records, helping James plan the yearly activities, and even writing letters and notes that were shared with workers and neighbors. She became a part of the community in a new way, respected not only for her marriage, but for her intelligence, her work, and her spirit. One day, a neighbor came to visit, bringing fresh vegetables from her garden. She looked around the ranch with admiration. "I never thought a young girl could manage such responsibilities with grace," she said to Emily. Emily smiled, realizing how far she had come from the nervous young girl who had walked down the aisle months ago. She had found her voice, her place, and a sense of purpose she had only dreamed of before. Emily also began to understand the true nature of James's gift. It was more than the room, more than the kindness and patience. It was the message that she mattered, that her thoughts, dreams, and desires were important. It was a gift that could not be bought or sold, one that would shape the rest of her life. As the year went on, Emily grew closer to James. They shared quiet evenings by the fire, walks along the river, and long talks under the stars. They laughed together, faced small challenges together, and learned to appreciate each other's strengths and differences. Emily realized that marriage was not just a formality or an obligation, it could be a partnership, a place where two people supported and inspired each other. The town, too, began to change in subtle ways. Seeing Emily's happiness and growth inspired others to reconsider their assumptions about wealth, marriage, and opportunity. They saw that kindness, understanding, and respect mattered more than money or status. Emily's story became a quiet example of how a life that seems forced or arranged could transform into one filled with purpose, joy, and meaningful connections. By the time the first anniversary of the wedding arrived, Emily stood in the fields where she had once walked as a dreaming young girl. She looked around at the ranch, the horses, and the land that had become a part of her life. She thought about the choices, the fears, and the unexpected blessings that had brought her here. She realized that the true gift she had received was not the room, not the wedding itself, but the chance to grow into herself, to explore her potential, and to be loved for who she was. Emily smiled as James joined her, taking her hand gently. "You've grown so much," he said, his voice warm. "And you've shown me a world I never imagined," Emily replied. She felt a quiet confidence and happiness that came from understanding, respect, and trust. The gift had transformed her life, not with gold or land, but with the freedom to be herself and the promise of a future full of hope. And in that moment, surrounded by the soft light of the setting sun and the endless fields of the ranch, Emily understood that sometimes life's most unexpected paths could lead to the most beautiful destinations. A 19-year-old girl had walked into a marriage, uncertain of her future. But she emerged with her dreams alive, her voice heard, and a life filled with possibilities she had never dared to imagine.